telepathic
antenna. And the range of this transmitter is enormous. Preston rebuilt one based on the data he had and the information, and put a message on a little tape recorder and fed it into the modulator. A 250-watt transmitter, which is not very high-powered. Put it out in Long Island in a friend's large yard, and put it on, run for about, I think, 72 hours. Maybe not continuously, but over 3 days. And the message was, if you hear this message, call such and... Well, Preston did not himself receive these calls. He set it up with a friend who had the phone number, and there was a tape recorder on that phone. They received over 600 phone calls from the entire East Coast, from Boston down to Florida, on the basis of a small transmitter. So with that, Preston proved that this sort of a system could be done. So you go, call the number, and you probably get the rest of your instructions, or maybe you get told to go to such and such place for the final indoctrination. Yeah. Who knows what? But this is the way they did it.
Get the final triggering that will trigger out the whole program.
Exactly.
A very interesting parallel here with the abduction victims that are implanted in this country. My firm belief is that these victims are abducted by the government, by our own patriotic American government, implanted, and depending on the different stories and rumors, between 1 in 40 to 1 in 10 of the American population have been implanted.
Right.
This may be another and more primitive system that requires a physical implant, a physical microchip in your head, in order for them to communicate with you. But many, I see here parallel stories. Many of the implantees have been told, have been prepared with some programming that is hidden very deep under many blocks, under many subconscious blocks that cannot be accessed by the...
by any normal means.
By any normal psychoanalysis. That's what they tell us. Maybe they do, but they don't tell. But anyway, there's an interesting parallel. These people are prepared for some eventual end times or some eventual grand finale of this 20th century scenario.
Could well be. There were some 10,000 kids who were processed through Montauk. We know this from the memories and some indication of a few of the records which have survived.
And that's only one of those
25.
Days.
And we extrapolate that they probably treated some 10,000 on each one of the other 24 bases. So you have the possibility here of 250,000 kids in or around puberty being so treated and brainwashed and given these instructions in their head, then sent off, maybe to their own time where they'd come from, or maybe into the future. No way to know, because those records are still sealed somewheres.
250,000 kids as a number may sound too large and shocking, but anyone who is willing to spend 5 minutes calling the milk carton 1-800 number for the missing milk carton kids would get an estimate, a rough estimate. The first call I did to this number, I was told by a lady that she said, well, we never had them totaled, we never had them calculated. Well, give me an educated guess. This is the first time I call. You've probably worked on the project for 5 or 10 years. Yeah, 5 years. So what's your guess? Well, she said 200 to 300,000 a year. I thought that she would say 20 to 30,000 a year. A year. So over several years of period, there won't be any problem at all to come with these 250,000 surplus kids that would be sent wherever needed, right, wherever required by the party.
And we do know that a few of the kids were pulled out for special projects, and there was an attempt made on certain ones to develop extremely high-level psi abilities. One part of that project that I was in charge of was canceled.
The boys from Brazil scenario,
something like that, right. And another part of the project which was ongoing was, of course, the one of attempting, as they've attempted for a long time, to create a crossbreed between humans and reptilians. And there's a formal name for this project, which was called Project God's Edge.
God's Edge?
Edge, E-D-G-E, God as it's normally spelled. I won't use the name of the man who is in charge of this project because he is still working for the government, and he is a friend of mine, and I don't wish to cause him extreme embarrassment or trouble.
On the cutting edge of godly genetics.
Yes.
Outdoing the Creator, outperforming the Creator in every perceivable way. This is the motto of the Luciferian hierarchy on the planet.
Right, and the aliens, that is the Orion group, the Draconians, the Liberons who had the technology, plus the Syrians who now in there very heavily all had this technology and knew how to implement it. They knew that we were sufficiently advanced to build whatever they gave us instructions to build, which is what we did. Now, what they ultimately intended for this hardware, this project, is hard to know, because after Duncan and I...
The hybrid project.
Well, that goes on elsewhere. But in any case, after Duncan and I arrived from the Eldridge and returned to the Eldridge, then the word went out, because there had been a plot afoot for weeks, if not a month, because suddenly Duncan, as the current Duncan, on the base had decided, and a few other people, that it was time to wreck this project. It was totally out of hand, and they didn't know really where it was going and so forth, so they cooked up a little plot. And that plot was that a special monster of the id would be implanted in Duncan's mind, and at the proper signal, which was after we had left to return to the Eldridge, and we knew that the Eldridge was probably back in the harbor.
Monster of the id would be monster of his subconsciousness.
That's right, and he would sit in a chair, and they would say, the time is now. The thing came out of his subconscious through the computer system, went into the transmitter, and was given 3D clothing, if you will, a solid 3D object. Flesh.
Muscles, bones.
Everything. By the computer.
It's a fascinating story. I was very skeptical at the beginning, but if we remember the book published by Wendell Stevens again, his brilliant line of books, contractee books, this particular book is UFO from Venus I Came, the recollections of Omnic Onic. There in their higher dimensional etheric culture, everyone can materialize objects, food, furniture, clothing, everything they need out of the ether. So basically there is nothing special in the materialization of matter out of the ether through the powers of the mind.
Not at all.
Here, a little bit of a Hardwarian crutch was used, because obviously our brains are not that good and powerful enough to do it entirely on their own.
No, the image was created and processed by Duncan, and the machine took the rest of it and gave it a solid 3D clothing. And this, of course, goes back a few years to some of the early experiments at Montauk, wherein they actually had done, before the time tunnel project actually came into being, were doing some experimental work in which they attempted, whether it was Duncan or one of the other psychics, would sit in a chair, visualize something in their mind, and on the base somewhere, this visualized object would materialize solid 3D. Not a holographic projection, but solid 3D. You could go up and hit it and whack it like a table or a chair. And sometimes then you shut the transmitter off, it disappeared, and other times it remained there.
I bet the base was full of surplus pin-up semi-nude models that these guys were fond of visualizing.
Well, there's a lot of possibilities there, but whatever they visualized, I'm sure they didn't continue this phase too long, because it would obviously get out of hand. But nevertheless, they proved a point, and that they could do this. And this was the first time that we know of in history where a machine could be used to create physical matter out of a person's mind.
Out of a person's mind.
And that was a real major milestone. From that, of course, later came the time tunnels.
To step back, just a little side question that actually is related to one of my speculations and dreams. I thought of, would it be possible to make a copy machine, a copier, a Xerox machine that would be able to copy one physical object into another? You put a gold bar or a VCR in the original chamber, and you push the copy button, and in the copy chamber you have the total perfect material